to the Rowdy.com Big Three with the Slate Master, Rick Mast, also known as a former Cup driver on Bass Masters. We're talking NASCAR heading into an off weekend. So the first question I got to ask you is, this early in the season, is this off weekend beneficial at all to the teams that maybe didn't get off to the start they were looking for?
Do you work out, Bass?
Yeah, I do.
All right, have you ever taken like a month off, just not done anything, then went back to it?
Yeah.
What happens? You take a month off. If you work out hard and you take a month off, then the next day you're going to get back. You're going to get back in the routine, and you start working out real hard. And like 4 minutes into it, you're like done, right? Well, then then all of a sudden, if you get through that stretch, then it comes back to you.
Right.
That's kind of what goes on with this weekend off. These guys have waited all winter to go to Daytona. They run Daytona in the next 3 races. And they're like, now we get a week off, and they kind of get a time. They kind of get a chance to collect themselves just a little bit.
Right.
I mean, they really do. I mean, they could run this week, it'd be no problem. But it's kind of a deal where, okay, we've got through the first 4 races. Now let's get ready for the stretch, and that's really the way they look at it.
Does a team like Junior's team that maybe the cars aren't quite right, can they take advantage of this at all?
No.
There's really not enough time for them to do anything to correct what's going wrong.
No, I mean,
it's just a mental refreshment.
It's a mental refreshment, man. I mean, the nuts and bolts of the car is what it is, and they've got plenty of resources and other things to draw from, i.e. the 24 car, the 48 car, the 5 car.
Right.
They've got all that to draw from. It's just a matter of, just doing it. We've talked about the 88 car earlier, and I don't know what to say about it, man. I just don't know what to say about those guys right now.
All right. Issue number 2, the attendance at Atlanta was not that great. It's been a big story.
Never is, Bass.
Yeah, it's funny with that racetrack. I don't know. Atlanta's just not really a pro sports town or something. I don't know.
Well,
no knock on Atlanta. It's a great place.
Not a lot, but some was written this week about the attendance at Atlanta and being off or being down. I don't know that I've ever seen that place packed. I mean, even going back when I first raced there in 88, 89, all through the 90s and through 2000 and all that, I don't know that I ever saw the place, just packed. And I would look at figures from California and Vegas and Daytona as far as figuring out what the economy's doing with our numbers and all that stuff. But you know what? They're still coming.
Yeah, they are still coming.
Big numbers still coming.
In this economic time, two questions here related to this. There have been some talk, some media types have suggested, especially beginning of the season, that with the economy like it is, and a lot of fans are going to be struggling in this economy, should the drivers do more to make themselves more accessible to the fans? Are they doing all they can? Obviously, you were a driver. You understood that part of the sport really well when you were a driver. What's your take on drivers doing more to promote the sport, being more accessible to the fans?
Well, I think, taking that out of context, Bass, there's one person that made that comment, and everybody's written about it, and that was Bruce Smith. And he said, basically these guys, the drivers, need to start doing more at the racetracks. Well, most of them do. I mean, you do what you can do. When you get to the racetrack, you're doing stuff for media Friday and Saturday. A lot of them do. Then you're going to these hospitality tents.
Right.
You're doing stuff for the sponsors. You're doing stuff for the manufacturer. You're doing all these things. And on Sunday mornings, you got these hospitalities and all this stuff you got to do. I mean, there's only 24 hours a day. You can only do so much. I like Junior's comeback when he said, the real problem is not the drivers. The problem is these promoters for the last decade and a half
taking it for granted.
Well, it's one of those deals like Skoal used to be. Skoal, you didn't have to sell the stuff. You just put it out there. Everybody used it.
Right.
Well, it's the same way with racing the last 15 years. You got a racetrack, you sit back, the people just come, you rake the money in. What Junior said, these promoters, a lot of them nowadays don't have to go out and sell tickets the way they used to have to do. And I kind of side with his thinking on that. I don't, if they can do more, sure, that's fine. Yeah, that would help. There's no doubt that would help. But how many drivers do you have, and how many hours do you have in a day?
Right.
And how much time is allocated to be able to do these things? I don't know.
What Junior or what Carl Edwards and Jeff Gordon said after the race was, the best thing we can do is put on a good show.
That's exactly right. The best thing they can do is put on a good show and be true to themselves. Be pure Americana. That's what our sport's all about, is Americana. An average Joe in America always has to a race car driver. As long as they keep that part good and pure, and put on a good show on the racetrack, it'll be fine. We're just talking about numbers, dude. All we're talking about is numbers.
Okay.
Big numbers, little numbers, the numbers are going to be there.
Well, speaking of numbers, another solution to this problem if you want to call it that, is maybe moving some races around. You know, that's another thing Bruton Smith has talked about, wanting a second race in Las Vegas, and he was saying we should finish the season in Las Vegas. We should finish the season in Las Vegas. How do drivers feel about realignment? Do they have tracks that they're like, oh, you know, Atlanta, for example, is a great racetrack, but if you look at the attendance and you're Bruton Smith, maybe you want to move one of those races to Las Vegas. Do drivers care about that at all?
No, it's not. It's the drivers could care less, honestly. It's about the sponsors. You know, it's about the media. It's about TV. It's about what's better for the sport. It's not about what the drivers think as far as where you're going to race at. Bruton always comes from one direction, and that's the direction of Speedway Motorsports,
right?
His company. That's all his comments are driven from the fact that he looks after Speedway Motorsports, and of course he wants. You know, he'd like to have the season ended deal at Vegas. He'd like to have the banquets at Vegas. You know, he'd like to get rid of one of the races in California.
President want to have it in his house.
Well, he probably would. Take a California raceway and give him one at Kentucky. You know what I mean? Whenever you see Bruton talk, man, you've always got to, you've always got to filter a little bit, thinking, okay, this is a little bit one-sided, maybe not 100% for the betterment of the sport, but for the betterment of Speedway Motorsports.
Right. You can't fault him for that.
Well, you can't fault him for that. I mean, that's what a good CEO does. Yeah. You know, but no.
Even if you take away Rockingham, I mean, does that, you know, even if you take away a track that's got some history, that's got some personality.
That pissed people off. That pissed people off.
That would get drivers angry.
Yeah, I mean, it did.
Because that was a good racetrack.
Well, the problem with that, Bass, is we always heard about it. All these moves were about television. It's all about television, right? Well, Rockingham was always one of the best TV races ever.
Yeah,
and it was replaced with California, which is one of the worst TV races.
Yes, that's right.
So, you know, then that screws your validity up. You know, as a driver thinking about the powers that be.
Right.
So, you know, I don't know, man. As far as, you know, the drivers are making so much money now, it doesn't matter. Just tell me where I got to go this week. You know? Tell me where I got to go.
I'll tell you where you got to go, but I better do it off camera. Thanks for joining me this
nice.
week. I'm just kidding.
Not nice.
You know I'm just kidding.
You're getting like Buck.
Buck's not even that quick-witted.
Well, that's true. You're bad because Buck's not here.
For Rick Mast, I'm Bass Masters. Thank you for joining us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll get you in here again. Maybe next week we'll get you in here a day or something.
And you have to work. That's another reason.
Yeah, you do have to work.
You're doing it all, baby. You're doing a good job, too.
Thanks, Brett.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate
Proud
that.
of
I
you.
know you mean that.
I'm
I know
proud.
You're sincere.
Proud of you.
We'll see you next time.
I'm tired of hearing people complain.
Rowdy.com, built by race fans, for race fans.